sites for people, aren't they? Like heritage sites. When I go into them, I feel like this sort of sense of the hundreds of thousands of people that have inhabited those spaces and the kind of cultures that the social cultures that they've created in those spaces. And that's really, really fascinating for me.
So many people like to go to old buildings and museums, National Trust properties, English heritage properties, cathedrals. We all love this kind of thing. It seems kind of inherent in our DNA or something to kind of be interested in our own history. So I'm just the same as everybody else in that case. I really, really like that.
So I have what I call a people who make art with people practice. I'm basically interested in people and social interaction, and I'm interested in how art making can be a way for us to start that social interaction. So at the end of projects, quite often there's not an exhibition or a sculpture. There might be something like a song that people have written together in the project, or a book, a story maybe, that people have written together. So when I'm working with a new venue, I always want to chat to volunteers, and if they're up for it, I always want to make stuff with them, and I want to get them physically sort of involved in the making of the project.
You know, as you can see from my room, I love collecting objects, old objects, and I find them very inspirational. And I don't sit in my room and make artworks and then try and find somewhere for them to go. I find the venue and then make something very specific in relation to the research that I do for that venue that then goes back into the site. Therefore, the site is very, very important to me. If I don't have a site, I don't have the inspiration, I can't make the work.
No, because I've just at the moment a piece. I mean, I'm primarily interested in architecture, public places, and how we engage with them, and what they can do for us, and how they're shaping us, and how we are influenced by that. And of course, a lot of our architecture and public places have a historical component, and there are lots of public buildings which are historical buildings, and the narrative around that I find always very interesting. So that's one of the aspects why I continue to come back to history and historical buildings and settings, and I work with them. But it's not the main reason why I do my work. I'm interested in the public itself, how we engage and what defines public, and how can architecture, if it's temporary or permanent, or sculpture in that case as well, shape that or ask questions around it. In some of my works, I have a specific focus on heritage and how we deal with that. Because there are so big heritage structures which have no use, and we need to give them a new meaning in our times, and I think that art can play a vital role in that.
This is great, this illusion is fantastic. I like going to venues that have a potential for me to do lots of research, to find stuff out, to speak to people who will tell me about the stories behind the buildings that I'm visiting or the objects that I'm looking at. I'm very interested in historical research, so I do an awful lot of my own historical research. And it's these stories that generate ideas. So that's one, it's the buildings and the objects, but two is the people. So the people who work there, people like the volunteers, because they're so welcoming, and they're the people invariably that you meet every day when you go to kind of do your research and look in the archives. They're the people who've got really interesting stories to tell you that are behind the scenes stories. And also I really find the audiences in non-art venues, in other words, I'm not interested in exhibiting in galleries. I like the audiences that go to museums and heritage sites. I like them because they're not necessarily there. In fact, most of the time they're not at all there to look at contemporary art. So I like the potential to surprise people within my own research. My own research is about wonder, and wonder, inherent in wonder, is surprise. So there's a great potential to surprise people.
We're currently at the Colne Valley Museum, which is in the village of Gokha, just outside Huddersfield. The exhibition is called In Praise of Makers, and it tells the story of the handcraft and the struggles and the determination really of the Colne Valley.
And into that space we can introduce that city.
Working alongside the volunteers who work in the museum, but also groups that use the museum, so it's used a lot by outside groups in the local community. I've really tapped into this extraordinary skill set, rich seam of skilled workers and hand workers, hand makers. And I've collaborated with a group of embroiderers who've made pieces based on 19th century protest ceramics and banners, radical politics, that sort of thing, but also distilling, I suppose, some of the sentiment and the existentialist, for want of a better word, ideas of the 19th century and everyday life. I've then been working with a local mill that produces cloth to make a banner, and some of the red cloth actually that's on the banner was also woven on the hand looms up here. I've then been working with the archive team really closely, looking through their collections, which are really rich and varied, to pull out just a few select items to display alongside the contemporary works. The net result, I think, is incredibly rewarding. It's changed my practice, and I think it's really changed the culture in some small way of the museum.
I think it's interesting that the audiences who currently come to those venues are not necessarily traditional art audiences, and I'm dead interested in working with people who maybe have less of a set idea about what art is or could be.
So you get kind of real reactions to what it is that you put in the space.